The ocean stretches endlessly, its shimmering waves hiding the struggles of those who live beneath them. In the dark corners of the reefs, where sunlight barely reaches, a group of pearl divers move silently through the waters. Their lives are bound by the shackles of servitude, their fates determined by the pearls they retrieve. During the prosperous Tang dynasty, the influential Shui family of Yangzhou established a pearl farm in Hepu, harvesting the precious South Sea pearls that adorn the nobility. But while these pearls fetch fortunes, the hands that bring them from the depths are those of slaves. Men and women trapped in a never-ending cycle of hardship. Duan Wu is one of them. From the moment she could walk, she learned to dive, to hold her breath for as long as her body allowed, and to move swiftly through the tides like a fish. The ocean became her sanctuary. Though the water was filled with unseen dangers, sharks that could rip apart flesh in an instant, she feared only the cruelty of men on land. On the shore, the overseers wield their whips mercilessly, punishing those too weak to dive. The women are kept in breeding sheds, their fates even crueler. But Duan Wu, sharp and unyielding, refuses to be broken. That evening, as the sky glows crimson with the setting sun, she walks along the shore, her feet sinking into the damp sand. A familiar unease prickles at the back of her neck. She turns and sees him. A man from Hepu, notorious for his greed and wickedness, has long set his eyes on her. Today, he sees his chance. He steps closer, his grin lecherous, his intentions unmistakable. Duan Wu, a pearl like you shouldn't be wasted on the sea. But Duan Wu is not a helpless girl waiting to be saved. Her fingers tighten around the dagger she always carries, the very one she uses to pry open clamshells. She does not speak. Her silence is her warning. The sharp glint of the blade is enough. The man hesitates, his confidence wavers, and then, with a sneer, he backs away. Duan Wu exhales, gripping the dagger even tighter. She knows he will try again. The next morning, word spreads like wildfire. The pearl farm's supervisor, Chui, has made an announcement. He seeks 5-inch pearls, offering a handsome reward to anyone who retrieves one. It is an opportunity that most dare not consider, for such pearls lie in Duanwang Pond, a place swarming with sharks and massive whales. But Duan Wu does not hesitate. She steps forward, her voice steady. "If I find the pearl, will you give me my freedom?" Supervisor Kui smirks. "If you bring me a pearl worthy of 500,000 coins, I will grant you your release." It is a dangerous promise, but Duan Wu sees no other way. Her friend, a fellow diver, trembles as she looks at the vast, deep blue sea. "Duan Wu, it's too dangerous." Duan Wu does not wait. She ties a sandbag to her waist, takes one last breath, and dives into the abyss. Above the water, far from the struggles of the pearl divers, a grand ship from the western regions docks at the harbor. Lavishly adorned, its golden trim gleams under the sun. On board, merchants from distant lands seek treasures to buy and sell. On the deck, chaos erupts. A merchant is caught trying to pass off inferior goods as high-quality products. His fate is swift. His eyes will be gouged out, his tongue cut. The Westerners believe in severe punishment. Just as the man falls to his knees begging for mercy, a voice cuts through the commotion. That is not justice. All heads turn. A young nobleman steps forward, his garments embroidered with patterns only the highborn can afford. Zhang Jinran. He stands tall, his gaze unwavering. According to Tang law, counterfeit goods warrant 50 lashes, nothing more. The merchants sneer. This is business, not the emperor's court. From Zhang Jinran does not flinch. Instead, he opens a box, revealing glistening pearls. If you must take something from him, take these instead. The Western merchant scoffs. The pearls, while beautiful, are under 2 inches. These are mere trinkets, he says. We have seen larger. Zhang Jinran's lips curl into a slight smile. Then show me. Trader Yan Zijing gestures toward the sea. If we find pearls larger than these, yours will be given to us for free. Zhang Jinran nods, unbothered by the gamble. His men exchange nervous glances, tugging at his sleeves. My lord, what if they truly have something greater? Zhang Jinran remains composed. He is not here for wealth. The quality of tribute pearls has declined dramatically in recent years, despite lower maritime taxes. Something is amiss, and he intends to uncover the truth. Beneath the waves, Duan Wu searches tirelessly. Her lungs burn, her fingers scrape against the rocks, but she does not stop. Then, finally, she sees it. A pearl unlike any she has ever found before. She reaches for it, her heart pounding, but before she can secure it, her companions descend upon her, their greed overtaking their fear. A struggle ensues underwater, silent and violent. Duan Wu, an exceptional swimmer, twists away from their grasp. With a powerful kick, she propels herself upward, breaking through the surface with the pearl clutched in her hand. She has won. or so she thinks. When she returns, triumphant, the matron overseeing the pearl divers takes one look at the pearl and smiles, but not at her. In a single, ruthless act, the pearl is swapped. Another diver steps forward, holding what should have been Duanwu's prize. Duanwu's voice cracks. "No! That's mine! You took it from me!" The matron meets her gaze, indifferent. "Do you have proof?" Tears burn in Duanwu's eyes as she pleads for justice. But justice is not for slaves. The matron sighs as if bored by her cries. "If you wish for freedom, there is another way." Duanwu lifts her head, anger and desperation entwined. "Become a pearl maiden," the matron says. "Sell pearls, and perhaps you will find your own escape." Duanwu grits her teeth. The old woman's words are clear. Leaving this place is only possible in death, but if becoming a pearl maiden is her only chance to be reborn, she will take it. That evening, Supervisor Kuei's voice booms across the pearl farm. "Who among you can sell this pearl for 500,000 coins? Duanwu steps forward once more. "I can." Supervisor Kui chuckles. "Ambitious, aren't you? Fine, sell it for 7 million and I will grant your wish." Duanwu's fists tighten. 7 million. It is an impossible number, but impossibility has never stopped her before. She lifts her chin, her voice steady. "I accept." The wind carries her words across the shore, marking the beginning of a new fight. Not beneath the waves, but on the land that has always sought to cage her. She will not remain in chains forever. As night falls, the air is thick with the scent of burning lantern oil. The pearl auction is about to begin. The courtyard is filled with merchants, nobles, and men who have come to witness the beauty of both the pearls and the women who sell them. Among the dancers moving gracefully under the soft glow of candlelight, Duanwu stands quietly. She is not like the others, delicate, practiced, or trained in the art of seduction. She has never danced before, never needed to. The music begins, and the dancers move in perfect harmony, their bodies flowing like silk in the wind. Duanwu tries to follow, but her movements are stiff, out of rhythm. She has never rehearsed for this moment, and it shows. Her breath quickens as she realizes the audience has begun to notice her struggle. If she makes a fool of herself now, no one will take her seriously. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spots a drummer sitting in the shadows of the courtyard. The steady beat of his drum matches the heartbeat in her chest. A memory flashes through her mind. Long ago, she had watched a dancer move with the rhythm of a drum, her body flowing like water, effortless and free. Without hesitation, Duanwu steps away from the other dancers and moves toward the drummer. The whispers in the crowd grow louder as she picks up a small drum and begins to play. The rhythm is sharp, commanding. She moves, not like the others, but like herself. Her dance is not one of grace and practiced beauty. It is raw, powerful, something no one has seen before. The other dancers slow, their confidence wavering. And yet, soon, one by one, they step back, allowing Duanwu to take the stage alone. When the music stops, a stunned silence falls over the courtyard. Then, applause. The Pearl Maiden has captured their attention. Now she must capture their wallets. She steps forward and holds out the pearl she has fought so hard to obtain. Its surface gleams under the lantern light, but Duanwu knows beauty alone will not fetch the price she needs. Her mind races. Then, without a second thought, she raises a dagger to her fingertip and presses down until a single drop of blood falls onto the pearl. Gasps ripple through the crowd. "This is no ordinary pearl," she says, her voice steady. "It is a blood pearl, a pearl bonded with life itself. One pearl, one soul. It wards off evil and protects those who own it." The murmurs in the crowd grow louder. A blood pearl is rare. Sacred, even. Its value is immeasurable. Yan Zijing steps forward, eyeing the pearl with intrigue. 6 million, he offers. Duanwu clenches her fists. It is a fortune, more than she has ever imagined, but not enough. She had made an oath. If she does not sell the pearl for 7 million, she will face a brutal death. She does not bow. She does not thank him. Instead, she drops to her knees, pressing her forehead to the ground in silence. The crowd watches, waiting. Yan Zijing frowns, impatience flickering in his eyes. 6.5 million. Duanwu remains motionless. A slow, measured voice cuts through the air. 7 million. All heads turn. Zhang Jinran stands among the crowd, his expression calm. The tension breaks in an instant. The deal is sealed. A servant steps forward, placing a gold leaf in the auction master's hands. The transaction is complete. The pearl is his. Duanwu rises, her knees bruised from the hard ground, but she doesn't feel the pain. She has won. She has survived. She approaches Zhang Jinran, lowering her head in gratitude. He does not ask for thanks. Instead, he gestures for her to walk with him. The night air is cool as they stroll along the market's edge. Zhang Jinran speaks of Chang'an, of its bustling streets filled with merchants from all over the world. It is a city of wonders, he says. There, you can find anything, spices, silk, treasures beyond measure. Duanwu listens, captivated. She has never known a world outside the pearl fields. Is it true, she asks, that there is a tree in Chang'an where wishes come true? Zhang Jinran smiles. The wishing tree, yes. They say if you write your heart's desire on a card and hang it on the tree, the heavens may hear you. For a moment, Duanwu allows herself to imagine. If she could make one wish, what would it be? Zhang Jinran watches her closely. What is it that you desire? Her answer is quiet, but firm. Freedom. Something in his expression shifts. He pulls a slip of parchment from his sleeve and hands it to her. Write it down. She hesitates, then takes the brush and writes the single word that has lived in her heart since the day she was born. Zhang Jinran takes the parchment, tucks it away, and nods. Then may your heart be like a clear mirror, and may all your wishes come true. Meanwhile, deep in the shadows, Yan Zheijing meets Kuei Wu. The pearl auction may have ended, but the true game is only beginning. Kuei Wu, who had been paid handsomely for the pearl, now sits in unease. Who is Zhang Jinran, he asks. Yan Zheijing smirks. He is no ordinary man. He is a sworn brother of the King of Ying, trusted by those in power. Kuei Wu's face pales. The King of Ying and the King of Tan are locked in a fierce struggle. With the tides turning in the King of Ying's favor, Kuei Wu knows his position is at risk. He has no choice but to act. I will sell all the pearls to you, he says, at any price. That night, Duanwu and Lala are summoned to Kuei Wu's chambers. A sense of dread coils in her stomach. Kuei Wu's gaze lingers on her, dark with intent. You think a mere auction can buy your freedom? He sneers. You are still mine. Duanwu stands tall. I am no longer your slave. A knife gleams in Kuei Wu's hand. Let me remind you of your place. Before he can strike, the door bursts open. The matron stands in the doorway, her face unreadable. Kuei Wu turns, scoffing. Kill her! The matron does not hesitate. In a flash of steel, the knife finds its mark, not in Duanwu, but in Kuei Wu's throat. The room is silent. Kuei Wu staggers, his hands clutching at the wound before collapsing to the floor. Matron grabs Duanwu's wrist. We must go. They flee into the night, but their escape is not unnoticed. Shadows chase them, voices shouting, footsteps pounding against the stone. At the harbor, the matron pushes Duanwu toward a small boat. Go, she commands. Duanwu shakes her head. Come with me. Tears shimmer in the matron's eyes. I cannot. For the first time, the truth spills from her lips. I am your mother. Duanwu's breath catches. The words are impossible. They are too much. I have watched over you, protected you, the matron says, but now I must let you go. Before Duanwu can speak, the matron pushes the boat off the dock. The last thing Duanwu sees is her mother standing against the tide of men rushing forward. Then, the world blurs, swallowed by the sea. The boat drifts aimlessly, carrying her toward an uncertain fate. Then, a larger ship looms above her, its lanterns glowing like stars. Voices call out. Strong hands pull her from the boat. Through her fog of grief and exhaustion, she hears a familiar voice, Duanwu. It's Jin Ran's voice, and she has been saved. The salty breeze filled her lungs as she opened her eyes, her body aching from exhaustion. The rhythmic rocking of the ship and the distant cry of gulls reminded her that she was no longer on land. The last thing she remembered was her mother's desperate plea, the forceful shove onto the boat, and the sight of the shoreline fading behind her. Now, she was here, adrift in an unfamiliar world, far from the land that had once been her prison. When he noticed her, he nodded, a quiet acknowledgement. She stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper, but firm. Thank you for saving me. Zhang Jinran did not ask for gratitude. Instead, he spoke of the wonders he had seen beyond the capital, the grand markets, the streets teeming with merchants, and the pearl divers who danced between the ship and the waves with effortless grace. To him, it was a mesmerizing sight, but to Duanwu, it was a cruel reminder. The divers did not leap for beauty. They leapt to survive. They plunged into the sea to escape the jaws of sharks, to fight for pearls, to ensure they were not left behind in the depths. The life he admired was the very one she had fought so hard to escape. The ship glided toward the dock, but with each passing moment, the weight in her chest grew heavier. She had lost something precious, the blood pearl, the only thing left of her mother's sacrifice. In the chaos of her escape, it had slipped from her grasp, lost to the shore where she had left behind the only person who had ever protected her. Then, she saw him. Kui Ding, her fingers curled into fists. The blood pearl had fallen at his feet when she was forced to flee. Now, he walked among the crowd, unaware that she was watching him. She turned to her younger brother, Xiao Ximi, whispering for him to stay put. Without hesitation, she stepped off the ship and disappeared into the bustling streets, her only thought on retrieving what was hers. Kui Ding moved quickly through the crowded market, his expression tense. Before the pearl tower burned, he had sold all the pearls to Yan Zheijing, believing he had struck a profitable deal. But when his subordinates inspected the payment, they discovered the gold was fake. Rage burned in his chest, a seething hatred for Yang Zujing, the man who had deceived him. But before he could act, His path was blocked. Yang Zujing's men were waiting. Duanwu watched from afar, her heart pounding in her chest. As they seized Kui Ding, she acted without thinking. Grabbing a thick wooden staff from a nearby stall, she rushed forward and swung it with all her strength. The blow landed hard. Kui Ding stumbled, blood spilling from his lip. She struck again, fury driving her forward. He did not deserve mercy, not after what he had done. Yan Sujing did not stop her. He watched, amused, allowing her rage to run its course. When her breath came in sharp gasps, she finally stepped back. Blood pearls rolled on the ground. She reached for it, fingers brushing against the smooth surface. But before she could grasp it, a heavy boot came down, pinning her hand in place. Pain shot through her fingers. She gritted her teeth, looking up. Yan Zejing smirked. The bystanders murmured, their eyes flickering between the fallen man, the pearl and the girl caught beneath Yan Zizi's heel. To them it was a simple scene, a slave girl reaching for something that did not belong to her. She shook her head, her voice sharp. "That pearl is mine!" But no one believed her. Yan Zizi tilted his head, pretending to consider her words. Then, with a careless wave of his hand, he commanded his men. The ropes bit into her wrists as she was tied and dragged toward the ship. The crowd watched, but did not intervene. This was how the world worked. Those with power took what they wanted. Below deck, the air was thick and suffocating. Rocking the ship did little to ease her pounding heart. She did not cry. She did not beg. Instead, she waited. That night, when the ship was silent, she moved. She knew where they kept the cargo, where they stashed the treasures taken from others. Slipping through the shadows, she reached the storage hold. There, among crates of silk and gold, she found it. The blood pearl gleamed in the moonlight, filtering through the cracks of the ship. Her fingers closed around it just as a hand gripped her shoulder. Yan Zejing's men seized her, dragging her back before she could escape. She struggled, but it was useless. She was thrown to the floor, breath knocked from her lungs. Yan Zejing stepped forward, arms crossed. "You really thought you could take it back like this?" She did not answer. She already knew the truth. "If you want it, you need to become strong enough to take it." She lifted her chin, defiance burning in her gaze. "Then name your price." He chuckled, shaking his head. 3 million. The number was absurd. It was impossible. But she did not waver. "Give me time," she said. "When the ship docks, I will find a way." Yan Xijing leaned back, considering her. Then he nodded. "Very well. You have until we reach the next port." As she was led away, she heard another voice. Pangju watched from the side, arms folded. Unlike the others, his gaze did not hold cruelty but curiosity. He had spent too long at sea. In Duanwu, he saw something different, something fierce, something unyielding. Later, when he spoke to Yan Zhijing, he suggested keeping her on board. "She is clever. She could be useful." But Yan Zhijing only scoffed. "If you have time to think about a girl, you have time to do your job." Duanwu heard this conversation from the shadows. She did not care for Kangju's interest, nor for Yan Zijing's dismissiveness. All that mattered was the blood pearl. She would find a way. She and her younger brother, Xiao Xiami, received no special treatment aboard the ship. Like all the others, they were expected to work for their meals. Idleness was not tolerated, and there were no exceptions. Despite his young age, Xiao Xiami quickly learned to observe those around him. He memorized the daily routines of the crew, noting who held the most influence. He whispered to Duanwu about Kang Ju, a warrior who never strayed far from Yan Xi's side. Duanwu listened carefully, storing the information for later. On deck was another man, Cao To, who was different from the rest. Unlike the hardened sailors, he spoke softly and treated the servants with unexpected kindness. He often volunteered to buy supplies for them, earning their trust. Over time, they handed him their wages, asking him to purchase goods on their behalf. But Cao Shumi was sharp. He listened closely and quickly realized that the prices Cao To charged were nearly double what they should be. He immediately reported this to Duanwu, expecting her to react with anger. Instead, she remained silent. She was not surprised. She only warned him to keep the information to himself. They were outsiders on this ship, and if they wanted to survive, they had to choose their battles wisely. That evening, Duanwu learned that the ship would dock the following day. Her heart pounded at the news. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. She sought out Yan Zejing, determined to ask permission to go ashore. She knew there was no way to earn enough money working as a servant aboard the ship. If she wanted her mother's pearl back, she had to find another way. She needed freedom, even briefly. Yan Zejing listened, but did not grant favors so easily. Instead, he gave her a task. If she could clean the entire deck before dawn, both she and Xiao Xiami would be allowed to leave. The challenge was brutal. The deck was enormous, and the night was long. With only rags and a bucket of water, Duanwu and her brother scrubbed until their hands bled and ached. Every time she thought of stopping, she forced herself to continue. Her arms burned, her back stiffened, but she did not let exhaustion take her. This was her chance, and she would not waste it. While Duanwu was struggling to complete her task, Yan Zijing received the news immediately. His expression did not shift, but his mind worked fast. If his sister was truly in Shaozhou, then Guangzhou was no longer safe. He gave one command, and the ship changed course. To distract the public and re-establish his influence, he announced a grand poetry gathering, a competition with high stakes. The winner would receive 10 taels of pearls, enough to lure the most talented scholars and noblemen. It was a clever move, one that would allow him to control the attention of Guangzhou's elite, while keeping his true intentions hidden. As the poetry gathering began, noble guests from across the region arrived in splendor. Among them was Choi Shiju, a woman whose greed had condemned countless pearl divers to death. Duanwu recognized her instantly. She was the one who had demanded more pearls each year, caring nothing for the lives that were lost in the sea. She did not hesitate. She faced him without fear. Her voice was steady, her words sharp as a blade. She warned him not to be too proud. She reminded her that every pearl she profited from was stained with the blood of the innocent. Wealth gained from suffering would never bring good fortune. Kui Shiju was not amused. Her face darkened, his arrogance turning into rage. Without hesitation, she grabbed Duanwu and forced her to the ground. Her strength overpowered her, and no one moved to stop Kui Shiju. Just as panic began to take hold, Yan Jinjin arrived. His presence alone was enough to make Kui Shiji release her. Nguyen-Wu breathed heavily, her body tense, but she did not allow herself to show weakness. Later, as the poetry gathering began, Zhang Jinran took the stage. He did not recite a poem about beauty or wealth. Instead, he spoke of suffering. His words painted a picture of pearl divers, of the endless days spent beneath the waves, of the lives lost in pursuit of treasures that others wore without a second thought. The audience listened in silence. When he spoke of pearls filled with mermaid tears, murmurs spread through the crowd. Duanwu stood among them, her eyes brimming with emotion. Long ago, she had asked Zhang Jinran to write a poem that would honor the struggles of those like her. Now, he has done it. Though the world may never truly understand their pain, at least for this moment, their voices had been heard. As the night continued, Zhang Jinran's men discovered Kui Ding's body. The coroner confirmed what was already suspected. Kui Ding had been tortured before his death. Zhang Jinran did not hesitate. He pointed the blame directly at Yan Zijing. He demanded justice, insisting Kui Ding had been murdered. Yan Zijing, however, denied all involvement. He claimed he had never met Kui Ding. Then, in a calculated move, he turned to Duanwu. She met his gaze and immediately understood what he expected. Only then. The rest of the story is told only in parentheses. Revised by fidelity, without hesitation, she lied. She stated that she had been on Yan Zijing's ship the entire time and had never seen Kui Ding. Zhang Jinran watched her closely. He had always believed her to be honest, and yet, here she was, covering for a man he suspected of murder. His disappointment was evident. He warned her, shielding a criminal would lead to consequences. But Duanwu remained unmoved. She did not flinch beneath his scrutiny. Once he left, she turned to Yan Zijing. She wanted her reward. She had struggled too much to let this moment pass. The fight for survival had already changed her. She had risked everything, and now she stood before the man who held the power to decide her future. He did not appear surprised by her persistence. Instead, he studied her carefully before nodding. He was willing to give her a chance. The opportunity excited and unsettled her. If she could prove herself useful, she might finally regain what was taken from her. The thought of leaving the ship filled her with hope. But another problem surfaced. What could she do? How would she earn enough to reclaim her mother's pearl? The possibilities seemed endless, yet none felt realistic. As she lay awake at night, her mind kept returning to one thing: waste materials. She had seen Cao Tao selling them for 18 coins per jin. It seemed like a simple business, but she wondered if she could do better. If she refined the scraps, she might find another use for them. Some could even be sold to medicine shops for additional profit. The only question was how to gather enough waste to make it worthwhile. She realized that the answer lay with Wei Yan, a guard who controlled much of the trade in unwanted goods. If she could convince her, there would be a chance to start something small. She sought Wei Yan out and explained her plan. She spoke accurately, making sure to highlight the potential for profit. Wei Yan was skeptical at first, but listened carefully. In the end, the possibility of easy money swayed her, and she agreed to help. She led Duanwu to the person in charge of scrap materials, where she was able to secure 200 jin of waste. Once she had the materials, She made a choice that surprised even herself. Instead of keeping all the profit, she shared the scraps with the lower deck slaves, the ones who spent their days toiling in the ship's darkest corners. Their expressions changed when she handed them the materials, as if they had been given something more than just waste. They had been given an opportunity. Together, they worked tirelessly to refine the scraps, preparing them for sale. Days passed, and finally the ship reached the shore. Duanwu struggled to pull the heavy cart filled with goods, her strength barely enough to move it. Xiao Shenmi, unable to assist her, could only watch. Before she left, he reminded her not to give up if she failed. If one negotiation fell through, there would always be another. As she walked through the marketplace, she quickly realized how unprepared she was. The merchants viewed her with suspicion, unwilling to trust an unknown seller. They questioned the quality of her goods and dismissed her offers without hesitation. Again and again she was turned away. She felt the weight of failure pressing down on her, but she refused to let it break her. While she struggled with her business, a greater problem was unfolding elsewhere. The fire at the Hepu Pearl Market had left Chu Shiji in an impossible situation. The court would expect the tribute pearls, and he knew that failure was not an option. To avoid punishment, he ordered his men to retrieve the required pearls, no matter the cost. At the same time, Yan Zhujing prepared for his next move. As his ship neared Guangzhou, he saw an opportunity to establish deeper connections in the region. He decided to go ashore, bringing rare gemstones from the western regions as gifts. The local leader welcomed him, pleased with the generous offerings. In exchange, he agreed to help sell Yanzit's pearls, provided the profits were divided fairly. Meanwhile, Duanwu continued searching for a buyer. After countless rejections, she finally met someone willing to take her goods. Relief washed over her as she accepted the silver note he handed her, directing her to a nearby shop to exchange it. For the first time, she felt success was within reach. However, when she presented the note at the bank, her hope quickly shattered. The clerk examined the seal and immediately rejected it. The note was a forgery. Panic set in as she rushed back to find the man who had deceived her. But before she could track him down, she ran into Tao Tao. He did not seem surprised to see her in distress. Instead, he accused her of delivering a shipment that was short. Before she could argue, he grabbed her arm, dragging her back to Yan Zejing. Yan Zejing listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When Cao Tu mentioned the exact weight of the shipment, 210 jin, Duanwu felt cold realization settle over her. The only ones present when the materials were weighed had been her and the swindler. How, then, did Cao Tu know the precise amount? It became clear that he had been part of the deception from the start. Before she could defend herself, she was restrained and dragged to the deck. A rope was tied around her wrists. Moments later, the whip cracked against her back. The pain was sharp, searing through her skin. But she did not cry out. She refused to show weakness. When the punishment was over, Yan Zi turned away, giving the order for her to return to the lower deck. He had made his decision. She would remain a slave. But Duanwu was not ready to accept that fate. Through the pain, she forced herself to speak. She insisted that she could fix what had gone wrong, that she would recover what had been stolen from her. She begged for another chance. Yan Zejing hesitated, watching her carefully. After a long silence, he nodded. He would give her the opportunity she demanded, but whether she succeeded or not was up to her. That night, she moved through the ship with silent determination. She found her way to Cao Tu's quarters, slipping inside with barely a sound. He was deep in sleep, unaware of the danger creeping toward him. She reached for the dagger hidden beneath her sleeve and pressed it lightly against his throat. His eyes flew open, panic filling them as he realized what was happening. He barely had time to react before she demanded to know where the swindler lived. Fear made him weak. He gave her the answer without resistance, his voice shaking. Once she had the information she needed, she disappeared into the night. The house was not hard to find. She moved quickly, slipping past locked doors, searching for the hidden stash of money. It did not take long. Beneath the wooden floorboard, she found what she had come for. By the time the sun rose, she was back on the ship, her fingers curled around the recovered silver. She returned the money, giving Yan Zejing what was owed while keeping the portion she had rightfully earned. But despite her success, she could tell he was unsatisfied. Confusion filled her. She had done what was asked of her, yet he still looked at her with disappointment. She asked him why he was punishing her when she had fixed the mistake. Yan Zejing's response was cold but clear. She had interfered in Tao Tu's business. No matter what her reasons were, she had stepped into a world she did not yet understand. Actions had consequences. She frowned, unable to grasp why he continued to protect someone who had deceived him so many times. When she questioned it, he explained simply, Cao Tao was useful, As long as he could complete the tasks given to him, he would never be discarded. Duanwu listened carefully, absorbing his words. Then, something shifted in her mind. She had spent her entire life fighting those who sought to control her, but now she saw the truth. Power did not come from resistance, it came from necessity. She lifted her chin, making a decision. If power came from usefulness, then she would become indispensable. She would make herself valuable to Yan Zijing. While Duanwu focused on proving her worth, turmoil brewed elsewhere. Kui Shiju had spent an enormous amount of silver, but received only a poor quality batch of pearls. The uneven and undersized pearls stacked before her filled her with frustration. She had expected high-quality pearls in return for her money, but instead, she had been given the lowest grade possible. Her anger only deepened when she discovered that while she had struggled to acquire decent pearls, Yan Zijing had already secured a vast collection of flawless, high-quality ones. When her subordinates reported, she learned the truth. Zhang Jinran had manipulated the market to restrict access to the best pearls. By cutting off supply routes, he had ensured that she would have no choice but to accept whatever was left. Instead of fighting for control, he had simply taken away her options, forcing her to settle for less. Determined not to let Zhang Jinran continue interfering with her plans, Kui Shiju arranged a meeting with Yan Zijing. She hoped to lure him into a trap by spreading false rumors. She claimed that the imperial court had grievances against Zhang Jinran and suggested that Yan Zijing could secure his safety by offering pearls to the court as a show of loyalty. She believed that by planting seeds of doubt, she could manipulate him into handing over his supply. However, Yan Zuzhu was not easily fooled. He calmly rejected her claims, insisting that he had done nothing outside the law. He had no reason to prove his loyalty when he had committed no wrongdoing. He refused to be pressured into unnecessary action. As Kui Shiji realized that her plan was failing, Yan Zuzhu instructed his men to bring out his collection of gems. When she saw the treasures before her, she was filled with both admiration and desperation. The tribute deadline was approaching, and she had no other way to meet the court's demands. Whether she liked it or not, she needed those pearls. Meanwhile, another crisis was unfolding. News of the Hepu fire had spread, reaching the ears of powerful officials. Cui Shiju quickly reported that Yan Zijing had deceived the Hepu steward with fake gold, ensuring that the information reached her brother. The court took swift action, demoting Xu Nanying, who had once been one of Yan Zijing's strongest supporters. With his position weakened, Xu Nanying dared not associate with Yan Zijing any longer, leaving him with fewer allies than before. While these political struggles played out, Duan Wu and the other women aboard the ship were finally allowed to go ashore. The market was alive, with the sounds of merchants shouting their prices, customers bargaining for goods, and the occasional laughter of children weaving through the crowd. The women had spent so much time confined to the ship that stepping into the bustling marketplace felt like a breath of fresh air. As they walked through the stalls, one of the women stopped in front of a display, her eyes drawn to a beautifully crafted red hairpin. The intricate floral design stood out among the other jewelry, and the delicate petals shimmered in the sunlight. Duan Wu, observing closely, realized that the flowers on the hairpin were made from waste scraps that most people discarded without a second thought. She immediately saw an opportunity. There was still a large amount of waste aboard the ship, waiting to be used. If she could repurpose it, she might be able to create something just as beautiful as the hairpin displayed in the market. That night, she stayed awake, sketching designs and carefully crafting a plum blossom pattern. Knowing the right material was key, she consulted Xiao Shimi. He pondered for a moment before suggesting the use of old shipwood. The material had endured years of wind and rain, making it exceptionally strong and resistant to cracks. It was a perfect choice for something meant to last. Long Wu now had a plan, but she needed a way to break into the jewelry market. She recalled something Xiao Xiame had mentioned before. Once, while following Cao Tao, he had seen him sell coral beads to the most prestigious jewelry store in town. She had never stepped foot in that store, so she needed a strategy to introduce herself to the shopkeeper. She soon learned that the store owner had a daughter named Pan Junyang, a woman surrounded by misfortune. Her first fiancé had died unexpectedly, followed by her second, leading to widespread rumors that she was cursed. As a result, she lived in isolation, rarely appearing in public without a veil covering her face. Duan Wu saw an opportunity. When she heard that Pan Junyang planned to visit the temple, she rushed there too. She kneeled before the Buddha statue, pretending to weep, speaking loudly enough for those nearby to hear. She claimed to be a woman suffering from the same fate, one who had lost her husband to misfortune and was seeking divine help to change her luck. The temple was filled with people and whispers spread quickly. Many began to believe that the Buddha had shown Duan Wu mercy, giving her a coral bead and red hairpin as a sign that her fate had turned. Pan Junyang, watching from afar, was intrigued. She saw Duan Wu as someone who shared her suffering, someone who understood what it felt like to be abandoned by fate. When she approached, she asked Duanwu how she had received the coral bead and red hairpin. Duanwu was ready to complete the deal, but before she could, Zhang Jinran appeared. Without hesitation, he exposed the deception, revealing the truth to everyone gathered. The moment Pan Junyang realized she had been duped, she turned away in anger and left without another word. After the incident, Zhang Jinran confronted Duanwu. He told her that greed would only lead her down the wrong path. While she had learned tricks from Yan Zijing's merchants, deception was not a long-term solution. He reminded her that business was built on trust. If Pan Junyang had bought the hairpin and found that it did not change her luck, she would have held a grudge, and there would be no future dealings between them. Duanwu knew there was a vast difference between herself and Zhang Jinran, but his words struck a chord. If she wanted to build something lasting, she needed to earn trust rather than take advantage of people's desperation. Determined to correct her mistake, she decided to personally apologize to Pan Junyang. Wanting to make a good impression, she even rented a fine dress for the occasion, knowing that appearances mattered. When she met Pan Junyang again, she took her to see a fortune teller. Pretending to be part of the Pan family, she listened as the fortune teller declared that her face was a sign of bad luck, and that she would bring misfortune to any man she married. Duanwu did not let the deception go long. She immediately questioned how the fortune teller could determine a person's fate based on appearance alone. She pointed out that she had never been married, so how could anyone claim that her face was a curse to her husband? The fortune teller, realizing she had been caught, had no choice but to admit that she often exaggerated to please her clients. Pan Juneng stood in silence, the weight of realization settling over her. The years of fear, the whispers behind her back, the endless judgment. It had all been built on nothing more than superstition and lies. Duanwu spoke to her sincerely, telling her that confidence was the only thing that could change her fate. She reassured her that as long as she held her head high, no one would dare look down on her. For the first time, Pan Junyang saw herself differently. Moved by Duanwu's words, she decided to place an order for a set of jewelry. Duanwu had earned her first official business deal. Not through trickery. She walked away with more than just a sale. She had learned a lesson about trust, and for the first time, she felt she was moving towards something greater. While Duanwu worked hard to build her name in the business world, Kui Shiju devised a plan to weaken Yan Zijing. She organized a challenge called the Mermaid Treasure Hunt and sent an official notice to Yan Zijing. The terms were clear. If he failed to secure the treasure, he would lose the right to purchase pearls in Guangzhou. The challenge was meant to corner him, stripping him of his influence and making sure he could not compete. When Yan Zijing asked his men who would attend the event, no one volunteered. The competition was known to be extremely dangerous, and no one was willing to take the risk. Cao Tu then suggested using a lottery system to choose the competitor. He handed out bamboo sticks, making everyone draw to determine who would go. He made sure Duanwu was the first choice. She pulled out a red-tipped bamboo stick, but something felt wrong. Her instincts warned her it was a ruse. She overturned the bamboo container and saw that every single stick inside was red. She understood immediately Cao Tu had set her up. Yan Zijing noticed what had happened and allowed another round of drawing. However, as Duanwu glanced at the others around her, she saw the fear in their eyes. They did not want to go. She realized that if she refused, someone else, someone less capable, would be forced into the role. She had spent her whole life in the water, and unlike the others, she was fearless. Knowing this, she decided to step forward and take on the challenge willingly. As the event drew closer, Yan Zijing handed her a gold thread vest, explaining that it could save her life if things got out of hand. She accepted the gift with quiet determination, knowing that it was more than just a protective garment. It was a sign that he was putting his trust in her. She felt grateful for the gesture, but more than anything, she was focused on her goal. The treasure at stake was the red pearl, and she had to obtain it. The competition was to involve retrieving a treasure from the sea. However, at the last minute, the officials in charge changed the rules. Instead of diving into the ocean, the competitors would have to search for the treasure on land. The sudden shift worked against Duanwu. She had an advantage in water, but on land, her chances of winning were significantly lower. Yan Zijing suspected something was wrong. The last-minute change seemed too convenient, as if it had been planned in advance. However, the competition had already begun, and there was no choice but to follow the new rules. Despite the disadvantage, Duanwu relied on her intelligence and agility. She managed to outmaneuver others and grab hold of the red pearl. Just as she thought she had secured victory, she found herself surrounded. Competitors began closing in from all directions, determined to take the treasure from her. A struggle ensued as she fought to keep the pearl. She dodged attacks, using speed to her advantage. However, amidst the chaos, she did not see the dagger aimed at her back. The blade struck her waist, sending a searing pain through her body. She stumbled, feeling her strength wane. If not for the golden vest Yan Zujing had given her, the wound would have been fatal. The armor had absorbed most of the impact, preventing a deeper injury. However, the force of the blow still left her weakened. She knew she could not afford to collapse, so she pushed through the pain and kept moving. But before she could fall, Yan Zijing appeared. He reached her in time, catching her before she could hit the ground. With little time left in the competition, he supported her while continuing to fight for the treasure. He soon realized that many of the competitors were carrying weapons. Unlike them, he was trained for combat. He moved with precision, knocking them aside one by one. His years of training had prepared him for such situations. As he fought, he managed to knock the pearl from one of Kui Shiju's men, causing it to shatter upon impact. However, by the end of the event, the remaining portion of the treasure had fallen into Kui Shiju's hands. The outcome had already been decided before the competition began. The judges overseeing the event had been bribed, and without hesitation, they declared Kui Shiju's team the winners. Duan Wu, already weakened from her injury, collapsed upon hearing the final verdict. The weight of defeat, injustice, and exhaustion was too much to bear. Blood surged to her throat, and before she could hold it back, she coughed up blood. Zhang Jinran had been watching from the sidelines the entire time. The moment she collapsed, he rushed to her side and carried her away from the crowd. He brought her to a doctor, ensuring she received immediate care. Meanwhile, Yan Shijing faced the consequences of the competition. With the loss, he also lost his right to purchase pearls in Guangzhou. It was a major setback for his business, one that could cost him his standing in the trade world. After receiving treatment, Duan Wu slowly regained consciousness. As she opened her eyes, she saw Zhang Qinran waiting nearby. He told her that she should reconsider following Yan Xijing. He explained that as long as she stayed by his side, she would constantly be in danger. He then handed her a token, telling her that if she took it into the city, she would find someone who could offer her a stable job and a new life. He wanted her to leave the caravan struggles behind and find safety elsewhere. She listened carefully, understanding his concern, but she could refuse his offer. The blood pearl was still out of her reach, and until she obtained it, she could not walk away. Zhang Jinran tried again, offering her another path to a secure future, but she turned him down. She appreciated his kindness, but she knew she could not repay such a favor. Zhang Jinran escorted her to the dock, where Yan Zojing stood watching from the deck. He did not say anything but observed as the two spoke. As Duan Wu approached him, she knew what she had to do. She presented herself before him, fully prepared to accept punishment for the loss. Yan Zejing gave her two choices. She could leave the ship and serve him as a personal maid, never again mentioning her desire to join the merchant group, or she could return to the lower deck, receive 20 lashes as punishment, and continue working. Without hesitation, she chose the second option. She understood the consequences of failure, but also saw the value of what they had gained. Even though they had lost the competition, they had proven their strength. Their presence had drawn attention, and even in defeat, the merchant group had gained recognition. Yan Zijing acknowledged her reasoning, but he reminded her of the significant loss. They had lost their right to purchase pearls in Guangzhou, which was a heavy blow to their trade. Duan Wu, however, had thought before. If they could not buy pearls directly, they could acquire them through partnerships with other jewelers. She explained that Pan Juniang's family owned a reputable jewelry business. Since she had built a relationship with them, they could use this connection to secure pearls through other channels. Yan Zijing did not reject the idea, but warned her to be cautious. He reminded her not to repeat the mistakes of her first business deal, where she had been deceived by fraudsters. With a new plan in place, Duan Wu received an advance payment to begin negotiations. She and her younger brother, Xiao Shumi, moved into better living quarters on the ship. No longer forced to endure the damp and cramped lower deck, they finally had a space of their own. Xiao Shumi was overjoyed. For the first time, he felt they were making progress. They were no longer just struggling to survive. They were moving toward a better future. Duan Wu shared Xiao Xiaomi's excitement, but she knew there was still much work to be done. She had lost one battle, but she was not defeated. The blood pearl was still waiting for her. Until she had it in her hands, she would not stop. Tao Tu, who had long dominated the scrap trade, found himself losing business because of Duan Wu. His steady profits had been disrupted, and his frustration grew each day. Knowing that Duan Wu was gaining more attention in Yan Zijing's circle, he feared that his influence would fade completely. To prevent this, he decided to bribe his superiors with fine wine, hoping to secure his position. Many within the merchant group had started to take notice of Duan Wu's rising status. Some were curious, but others, like Chao Tu, were waiting for her to fail. Despite the tension around her, Duan Wu focused on her job. She crafted handmade hairpins, each carefully designed with intricate patterns. She delivered them to Madame Feng's jewelry shop, where they sold quickly. Seeing the success of the hairpins, Madame Feng recognized Duanwu's talent and encouraged her to think about expanding her business. During one of her visits, Duanwu discussed her next goal: purchasing pearls. The recent mermaid treasure hunt had been the topic of many conversations, and the market had taken a great interest in it. Madame Feng, who had already heard about Duanwu's involvement, realized that her friend had risked much to secure her future. Willing to support her, Madame Feng agreed to help her make connections. One afternoon, Madame Feng invited Duanwu for tea. As they walked toward the tea house, they unexpectedly ran into Zhang Jinran, who appeared to have been expelled from an inn. Although his composure remained intact, it was clear something was amiss. Remembering his past kindness, Duanwu invited him to join them for tea. During their conversation, Zhang Jinran revealed that he had been framed, leaving him with nowhere to stay. The inns had refused to take him in, and he was left with limited options. With few choices left, he mentioned his plan to seek refuge under Yan Zijing's protection. Duanwu introduced Zhang Jinran to Yan Zijing. Though the meeting was far from warm, Yan Zijing greeted Zhang Jinran with mockery and sarcasm, making it clear that their relationship was strained. Despite his hostile attitude, Yan Zijing allowed Zhang Jinran to stay. After Zhang Jinran left, Yan Zijing spoke privately to his closest servant. He was well aware that Xu Nanying feared Zhang Jinran's investigation and had already started taking precautionary actions. Zhu Nanying, a high-ranking official, was responsible for overseeing the Pearl Tribute, yet large amounts of wealth had disappeared under his watch. Zhang Jinran was too close to the truth. If he continued digging, things would become dangerous. Yan Zijing issued a direct order to his men: they had to be more careful. The wrong move could draw unwanted attention and put all their lives at risk. That night, Yan Zijing arranged a private meeting with Zhang Jinran. Their history was complicated, and both men understood that neither acted without reason. Zhang Jinran, fully aware of Yan Zijing's questionable actions in Guangzhou, confronted him about his true intentions. From burning down the Pearl Pavilion to purchasing all available pearls at high prices, Yan Zijing's actions did not reflect those of a simple businessman. Zhang Jinran questioned why he had deliberately pushed the Kui family into a corner. He wanted to know if there was a deeper grudge between Yan Zijing and Kui Shiju. Yan Zijing did not provide a clear answer. Instead, he brushed off the accusation with a vague response, refusing to explain himself. Zhang Jinran, unconvinced, decided to stay silent for the time being. Regardless of his doubts, staying in Yan Zijing's heavily guarded merchant fleet was still the safest option. His ships were filled with skilled fighters, and there was no better place to remain hidden. Zhang Jinran knew that when the right moment arrived, he would act on the information he had gathered. Later, Yan Zijing opened a hidden chamber in his room and invited Duanwu inside. She had never seen this place before. The secret room held treasures beyond her imagination: precious gems, gold ornaments, and rare artifacts from the southern regions. As she took in the sight of the valuables, she could not ignore her growing suspicion. Yan Zijing had never mentioned the true extent of his wealth. Now that she saw it for herself, she began to wonder how deep his connections ran. Yan Zijing took a jade hairpin from the collection and handed it to her. Without offering much explanation, he informed her that she would represent the merchant group at the upcoming pearl auction. He wanted her to dress appropriately and handle the negotiations with confidence. His goal was clear: he wanted to purchase every pearl at the auction. Meanwhile, Zhu Nanying's involvement in corruption had reached a breaking point. For years, he had secretly colluded with the Cui family, embezzling a fortune. Now that Zhang Jinran had gathered solid evidence, Zhu Nanying realized that his position was in serious danger. When he received word that Zhang Jinran had sent the account book to the palace, he knew that he had very little time left. Desperation took over, and he decided to eliminate the biggest threat standing in his way. He sent assassins to kill Zhang Jinran, hoping to silence him before he could act. However, Zhang Jinran had trained for years in self-defense and had sharp instincts. When the attack came, he reacted quickly and skillfully, managing to evade the assassins. His men, who had been keeping watch, immediately pursued the attacker and tracked him back to Xu Nanying's residence, confirming his involvement. When Duanwu heard that Zhang Jinran had been injured, she wasted no time. She went to his side and carefully applied medicine to his wounds, ensuring they were properly treated. As she worked, Zhang Jinran warned her again about Yan Zijing. He told her that Yan Zijing was ruthless and unpredictable, reminding her that he owed loyalty to no one. He urged her to leave the merchant fleet before she got caught in something she could not escape from. Duanwu, however, refused to leave. She knew the risks, but she also understood it was the only way forward. Zhang Jinran sighed. He remarked that Yan Zijing thrived in a world where only the strongest survived. Duanwu agreed, but she also noted that for people like her, every day was already a battle for survival. Meanwhile, Yan Zijing received news that his sister had been found in Shaozhou. Knowing that Guangzhou was no longer safe, he ordered his men to wrap up their work quickly so they could leave for Shaozhou immediately. While preparations were being made, Cao To, who had been waiting for the right opportunity to strike, saw his chance. He had been growing more resentful of Duanwu's presence and could no longer tolerate the way she continued to succeed. Watching as she gained favor among the merchants, he refused to accept being pushed aside. When he learned that she would be leaving with Wei Si, he immediately devised a plan. Using a false excuse, he seized Xiao Xiaomi and took him to the lower deck of the ship. Hidden from sight, he restrained him and subjected him to relentless torture. He knew that if he wanted to hurt Duanwu, the best way was to harm the person she cared for most. As the night stretched on, Xiao Xiaomi remained trapped, bruised and bleeding, unaware of what fate awaited him. While Xiao Xiaomi endured the pain in silence, Duanwu was completely unaware. She had left the ship that morning with Wei Sihui, traveling in a carriage to purchase pearls. Sitting inside the finely crafted vehicle, she found the experience new and exciting. The gentle rocking of the carriage and the smooth feel of the seats made her wonder how different life was for those who had always lived in wealth. But before she could fully appreciate the ride, Wei Sihui suddenly clutched his stomach, claiming he was in pain. He insisted that she go ahead alone to handle the business, placing a wooden box in her hands. He assured her that inside were gold bars, more than enough to purchase the pearls. Trusting his words, she stepped out of the carriage and entered the merchant's shop. She confidently presented herself, making an offer to buy all the pearls available. Everything was going smoothly until she opened the box to reveal the deposit. Her breath caught in her throat. Inside, instead of gold, lay nothing but smooth, ordinary pebbles. A wave of cold panic shot her. She had walked straight into a trap. Her mind raced for a way out. She had to think fast. If she left empty-handed, it would be a disgrace. The people waiting for her to fail would never let her live it down. Clenching her fists, she turned to Shi Nue, a respected merchant from the Nai region, who was known for his high-quality craftsmanship. Instead of backing down, she proposed a new deal. She explained that she could design pearl hairpins, the most intricate and dazzling pieces anyone had seen. If his pearls were used in these hairpins, their value would more than double. Merchants valued one thing above all else: profit. And the promise of higher earnings was enough to interest Shi Nue. He agreed to let her return the next day with a sample. If he was pleased with the results, all his pearls would be sold to Yan Zijing's fleet. With hope restored, Duanwu returned to the fleet, only to be met with horror. Wei Suhui was tied to a wooden pillar, his body covered in fresh wounds. Blood dripped down his skin, pooling at his feet. The air was filled with murmurs. Yan Zijing had found evidence in Wei Suhui's room. There were land deeds and house contracts, all gifts from Kui Shiju. The betrayal was undeniable. Yan Zijing announced Wei Suhui would be executed. Duanwu's instincts took over. She rushed forward, blocking the way. She pleaded for mercy, her voice unwavering despite the fear curling in her stomach. It was dangerous to challenge Yan Zijing in front of his men. The wrong words could turn his wrath on her. Before he could respond, Zhang Jinran entered. He reminded Yan Zijing that treating people this way could bring trouble. Killing Wei Sihui would only raise suspicions and invite more eyes onto their already tense dealings. Yan Zijing considered the warning before making a final decision. Instead of executing Wei Sihui on the spot, he ordered him to be thrown into the sea. It was a fate no less cruel. As the crowd dispersed, Duanwu remained standing, gripping the box of stones. She turned to Yan Zijing and asked if this was the outcome he had foreseen. He simply nodded. She had believed she had chosen the right side. She had thought she was among people who valued her skills, her efforts. But in that moment, she realized she was nothing more than a piece in their game, a tool to be used and discarded. The pain in her heart only deepened when she found Xiao Xiaomei. He lay in the corner of the lower deck, barely conscious. His back was covered in deep wounds, and his arms were too weak to lift. Her hands shook as she carefully washed the dried blood from his skin. Xiao Xiaomei looked at her through half-lidded eyes. Despite his pain, he forced out a small smile. He told her not to hold hatred for Cao Tao or the others. They were too powerful. Fighting them would bring only more suffering. The next morning, with her emotions locked away, Duanwu carried her handmade hairpin to Shi Nue. Every brushstroke, every carved detail had been made with precision. She needed this deal to work. Shi Nue examined the hairpin with interest. He seemed pleased, ready to proceed with the business. But before the deal could be sealed, Kui Shishiju arrived. Kui Shishiju was a man who never liked to lose. As an official merchant, his products were superior in craftsmanship. The jewelry he presented was sleeker, more refined. He had an advantage Duan Wu could not match. To secure the pearls, he offered a higher price, increasing his bid by 20% and placing a deposit of 500 gold. It was an amount Yan Zejing could not compete with. Duan Wu understood when to step away. She calmly withdrew, but before leaving, she whispered a warning to Cui Shiju. She told him that overpricing could lead to disaster. That night, in the darkness beyond the ships, Wei Sihui managed to reach the shore. His body was weak, but he was alive. But before he could escape, a figure emerged from the shadows. A blade sliced through the night air. The next morning, his lifeless body was found aboard the ship. News spread quickly. Zhu Nanying saw his opportunity. He offered a high reward for information, and soon, someone pointed fingers at Yan Zijing. Within hours, officials tied and took him. Duan Wu watched in disbelief. Yan Zijing was not the kind of man to leave evidence. He was too careful, too precise. Something felt wrong. Before she could make sense of the situation, Kang Ju, Yan Zijing's most trusted aide, summoned her. When she arrived, he handed her the blood pearl. She stared at it, shocked. It was the thing she had fought for, suffered for, and yet Yan Zijing had just given it. She questioned the timing. If he had intended to hand it over, why now? Why after his arrest? She still owed him the 300 gold they had agreed upon. Kang Ju dismissed her concerns. He told her to leave while she still could. She had what she wanted. It was time to go. But Duan Wu hesitated. Meanwhile, the officials were tearing through the fleet, seizing valuables hidden throughout the ships. Crates of gold, silks, and jewels were pulled from secret compartments. Duan Wu saw an opportunity. She made sure Peng Kongxi overheard whispers about hidden treasures still inside Yang Zijing's room. That night, Peng Kongxi and Cao Tao slipped into the chamber, thinking they were about to claim untold riches. Instead, they walked straight into a trap. Kang Ju had been waiting. Stealing from within the fleet was a crime that carried severe consequences. Without hesitation, Kang Ju dragged them onto the deck, tying them up for all to see. As dawn broke, Duan Wu stood before them, a whip in her hands. She did not hesitate. With each lash, she ensured they felt the pain they had caused others. From afar, Zhang Jinran watched. Once, he had known Duan Wu as someone full of kindness, but now, as he saw her delivering punishment without flinching, he realized something had changed. She was no longer the same girl. She had become as ruthless as Yan Zijing. Zhang Jinran had grown up in a world of comfort and learning. His childhood had been filled with books and philosophy, shaping his understanding of honor and morality. Watching Duan Wu standing over the beaten figures of Peng Kongxi and Cao Tou, whip in hand, felt foreign to him. She had once been a quiet, nice girl, but that person was gone. In her place stood someone hardened by survival, someone who had learned to be ruthless. Duan Wu did not hesitate as the whip struck again. She had spent too long watching others take from her, waiting helplessly as fate tossed her around like a stray leaf in the wind. That time had passed. Now she held control in her hands, and she would not allow anyone to challenge her position. Cao Tu and Peng Kongxi had underestimated her. They had thought she would always be the girl who obeyed orders, the girl who could be manipulated. They had believed her kindness was a weakness, but as the pain from their punishment coursed through their bodies, they realized they had been wrong. Zhang Jinran turned away from the scene, troubled by what he had witnessed. He understood the harshness of the world, but seeing Duan Wu become part of it unsettled him. He had once thought of her as different, someone untouched by greed and cruelty, but the world had a way of shaping people, and it had also changed her. With less than 10 days remaining until the tribute pearls were due, tensions ran high. Cui Shiju was determined to secure the pearls at any cost. Meanwhile, Duan Wu led Manager Zhao into the fleet's secret chamber, where countless rare treasures were stored. The old steward, who had spent years working under Yan Zijing, understood immediately that these valuables could be used as collateral to participate in the official auction. Duan Wu recalled how Yan Zijing had once instructed her to purchase every available pearl, leaving none for the Kui family. She knew what she had to do. That night, Kang Ju approached Yan Zijing to report Duan Wu's plan to bid in the auction. He asked if she should be stopped. Yan Zijing merely watched the flickering candlelight, a faint smirk on his lips. He had anticipated this. Every move had already been accounted for, and whether Duan Wu succeeded or failed, he had the means to clean up the mess. At the auction, the atmosphere was tense. Duan Wu had invited Zhuo Baojai to bid alongside her. Across the hall, Cui Shiju sat with her father, their expressions unreadable. The auction was conducted as a blind bid, meaning the contents of the sealed boxes remained a mystery to all. As the bidding began, Zhuo Baojai and Duan Wu drove the price higher and higher. Determined not to lose, Cui Shiju's father stepped forward, matching each bid with growing frustration. Cui Shiju tried to warn him, whispering that Yan Zejing was a master of deception, but her father dismissed her concerns. He had never taken his daughter's opinion seriously, and he would not start now. Kangju had already calculated that Kui Shiju's group had brought 2,600 taels of silver. Duanwu carefully pushed the bid up to 2,550 taels, ensuring that Kui Shiju's father would be forced to go all in. As expected, fear of losing drove him forward, and he raised the bid to an astonishing 2.6 million taels. A hush fell over the auction hall. Documents were signed and sealed boxes were carried forward. As the lids were lifted, gasps rippled through the crowd. Inside the crates were worthless trinkets. Kui Shiju's father paled, then collapsed where he stood. The weight of his stupidity pressed him, choking. Duanwu exhaled slowly. It had been a dangerous gamble. If Kui Shiju had withdrawn at the last moment, she would have been the one left with nothing but rubbish. Before the chaos could settle, another shock rippled through the crowd. In the midst of the gathering, Yan Zijing appeared, and by his side stood Wei Sihui. The accusation that had imprisoned Yan Zijing had been false. The supposed murder had been a carefully woven illusion. Kui Shiji realized too late that she had been played. Not only had she lost the bid, but her family's fortune had been thrown away in an instant. After the auction's victory, Yan Zijing hosted a celebration banquet on the deck. The air buzzed with triumph, and the fleet's members drank and laughed, basking in the success. Duanwu, however, had other concerns. She approached Manager Zhao, requesting that he be rewarded for his years of service. Yan Zijing listened, then asked Manager Zhao what he wanted. Without hesitation, the older man admitted that he wanted to return to his hometown, to live out the rest of his days in peace. Touched by his loyalty, Yan Zijing granted him not only a generous reward, but also gifted him a shop in Yangzhou. Seeing their master's generosity, the fleet's members felt reassured in their loyalty. Even the most hardened among them valued a leader who rewarded those who served him well. Meanwhile, Kui Shiju's father directed all his fury at his daughter. He blamed her for their loss, unwilling to take responsibility for his own arrogance. But Kui Shiju had never been the type to surrender quietly. She began searching for a way to regain her standing. She soon discovered that Xu Nanying had already prepared the lotus platform for the tribute ceremony. With time slipping away, she arranged a secret meeting with him, hoping to buy herself a few extra days. Xu Nanying, ever the opportunist, was not one to entertain pointless discussions. But when Kui Shiju hinted that she could help eliminate Zhang Jinran, he paused. That was an offer worth considering. Soon after, Kui Shiju contacted Kui Jia, instructing him to take care of Zhang Jinran. The plan was set. Unaware of the brewing plot, Zhang Jinran was preparing to leave Guangzhou. Before his departure, he invited Duanwu to explore the Hu market with him. It was a rare moment of peace, a brief return to something resembling normalcy. But peace did not last. As they wandered the bustling market, the air suddenly shifted. Duanwu sensed it before she saw it, the presence of danger lurking in the crowd. From the corner of her eye, she caught sight of their pursuers. Cui Jia. A rush of fury coursed through her. Without thinking, she grabbed the nearest object, a thick wooden staff, and charged forward. The people in the market gasped, stepping aside as she swung with all her strength. Cui Jia barely dodged, stumbling back. He had not expected her to fight so fiercely, but before she could land another strike, he turned and disappeared into the crowd. The encounter left her breathless, her pulse hammering in her ears. Zhang Jinran, standing behind her, said nothing. The truth was clear. The battle was far from over.